Lisa Perry.
And you were testifying when we broke for the recess, correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 91 was what we were talking about. Judge, I think you may have to turn on the thing for me. It's not on. And Exhibit 91, this is what we were talking about, correct?
Correct.
And you indicated that there was at least 2 strikes so far, correct?
Correct.
If we go back to Exhibit number 83, and I'm not talking about strikes, I'm just talking about areas at this time, it would seem that there are 3, based on what we see here, there are 3 separate areas where the source of blood was, correct?
Correct.
And part of the reason would be that the one that's Exhibit number 86, this area of the door, plus Exhibit number 91, this area here, and then what we looked at here, Exhibit number 83, are not joined, if you will, or connected in any way, right?
Right.
Okay, Exhibit number 94. We talked about the wall in Exhibit number 91, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And how about down here on the ground? What kind of drops are those?
Those are blood stains that I wouldn't offer an opinion whether those could be passive or be ones that hit the ground from the impact on that west wall, on the east wall.
And why is that?
Because they didn't offer enough characteristics to make a determination.
And they could be related to the ones on the wall, they could not, right?
Correct.
Now, to the right of that, we also see some other staining. Do you see that right there?
I do.
And is it your opinion that this on the left, is that related or not related to those on the right?
May or may not.
And why do you say may or may not?
There's nothing distinct, a pattern to recognize. They're just blood droplets, and just a few blood droplets don't always create a pattern.
One of the things that we talked about was whether it's a passive placing of the drop versus an active placing. Is this something that gravity acted upon these here, or is it something that you can't tell us?
I can't tell. When I talked about the passive drops, one of the ways that we identify those is because they are nice, round, 90-degree drops when they impact the surface like this. So they're nice and round. Those aren't as pretty, so to speak, so I wouldn't want to offer an opinion on that.
Exhibit number 95, and what are we looking at here in terms of the scale?
We're looking at a scale that is on the south end of the bathroom that has blood stains on top of and underneath the scale.
And did you examine this at the scene, or did you conduct your examination back at the lab?
I observed it at the scene and then also examined it back in the laboratory.
What did you do at the lab?
At the laboratory, I did the Castlemeyer testing, the preliminary test we discussed earlier on the staining up to I think I can touch this up in here.
Okay, and you did the Castlemeyer test there?
I did the Castlemeyer on that test there.
On top or on
that
bottom?
stain. On the top.
And did you do any Castlemeyer on the bottom?
No, I did not. That was actually at the crime scene.
Okay, and at the crime scene when you did the Castlemeyer, what part of it, the bottom of the scale, did you examine? Or did you not do the Castlemeyer at the
I did
scene?
not do any Castlemeyer on the
All right.
on the bottom surface.
But there was a reddish substance that you believe to be blood underneath there, right?
This right here. Trying the technology.
That one right there. And knowing what you know about blood spatter, what is the scenario? How is it that this blood drop was stuck, if you will? Is it to the scale or is it to the floor?
It is on the floor. The stain is on the floor itself.
Okay, so if this scale is on top of it, what does it tell you about the stain that's there?
That the scale was moved into the position above the blood stain.
And do we have any issues about water with regard to this one or not?
No.
Exhibit number 96. Okay, right up against the wall here, do we see?
There are blood droplets.
And did you have occasion to look inside the wastebasket?
I did.
And what did you find in the wastebasket?
There was a paper towel and 2 empty toilet paper tubes, type cardboard rings.
Did they have anything or any indication of blood or anything that looked like blood in that tub, in that wastebasket?
I examined the toilet paper tubes back in the laboratory, and my indications with my test were that there was blood detected.
So you now have what appears to be blood, in your belief it is blood, in the trash can there. You have it right again there, and then you also have it underneath the scale. How many events are we talking about here at this point?
Well, we've discussed that you counted 3 prior.
Right.
And then this is more bleeding, but I don't know how many events that are moving into the corner.
Would this be a separate event from the other involving the wall? This one over here.
The direction, it seems far to have it traveled, but I don't know that I could rule it out completely.
It's possible that it could be another event that was occurring in this area here.
Yes.
Just to orient ourselves, exhibit number 93. This is the scale we've been talking about, and the trash can is right here, correct?
That's correct.
And then we have the sink area, right?
Yes.
Exhibit number 98. What are we looking at here?
We're looking at the sink that is to the north. There's 2 sinks in the bathroom. This is the one to the north.
And we've been talking about events so far. We've talked about 3. Is this a separate event?
From the other, yes.
Let's start talking about this area here in front. First of all, would you agree or disagree that the coloration of that seems to be a little bit different than the one inside the bowl?
I would.
And what would cause something like that?
It appears diluted as if it would be with water.
And exhibit number 100, as it applies to that, what are we looking at here?
The blood is dripping down the side of the ledge of the counter.
So in terms of what we've been talking about, passive versus active, how would you characterize this? How would you define it? Tell me about it.
Those diluted patterns, I would say, are evidence of transfer between a blood-bearing source and a non-blood-bearing source. But as I indicated earlier, I don't know if this is blood is present already and then something moves through it, or the blood is on another item and then transfers onto the counter, or a combination thereof.
But bottom line is, there is at least at some point the source placing the blood there, right?
Absolutely.
And at some point, something came by and swiped it, if you will. I think you call these swipes, right?
Swipes or wipes, yes, depending.
If we look to the left of that, do you see this right here?
I do.
Is that the same thing as what we've been looking at, or not?
Those are what we were previously discussing as passive drops that are simply being acted upon by gravity.
Let's look at Exhibit 105. Are those the ones we're talking about?
Yes.
And then a larger view of it, or 102. You see that?
Yes.
All right. Well, how could these blood drops here on Exhibit 105, how could they find their way to get there in that shape?
The blood source was above this location, above the sink.
And was
the edge of
the
the sink.
blood source what was the blood source doing?
Bleeding.
I understand that, but was blood source moving left to right, moving front to back, or just stationary?
Well, depending which way, if that's it moving into the sink or backing up out of the sink,
All right.
but in some sort of motion over the sink.
At some point, there was some motion by the blood source over the sinks, and that's what that tells you, right?
Correct.
And it also tells you that, I guess it was over the top of the sink.
Over the top.
Is this partly a function of gravity?
Yes.
We've talked about those, and you indicated a sort of in and out motion by the source. And then we talked about this source, or not this source, but this area here on the ledge. Both of those appear, from what you're telling me, to be somewhat movement oriented, or would that be incorrect?
No, I'd say that. I would agree with that.
How about this area here, inside the bowl? And in terms of placement of the source, 103 shows it, and then also 104. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes, I see that. I'm sorry.
In terms of where the source was, and based on the patterns that you have there.
The source is above the sink, and some of those you can see are specific droplets. Some of them, because of the curvature of the sink, are merging together.
But the source of the blood is
Above the sink.
Do these also imply movement like those that are down here, or do they not?
Well, since they're in several different locations, it would imply that the blood source is moving a bit, yes.
Could all of these functions, Exhibit 104, the scraping there, or the swiping, the dropping of the blood there, let me see if I could focus a little bit more, and the middle of the tub of the sink, does that give you any indication of time, or can these all be done at the same time, or are they events that are occurring? There's one, there's another, we just don't know which is first. Why don't you tell me about that?
I would say that this movement at the edge of the sink could be concurrent with the drops that are into the sink.
Including the ones that are in the middle there.
Yes.
Exhibit number 98. See this area right over here near the mirror?
I do.
Was there any blood spatter or any blood on the mirror?
There was. It's very difficult to see when we get to those shots because of the mirror, but there was.
There was some on the mirror. With regard to the blood on the mirror, or the substance on the mirror, what kind of action, or what can you tell me about those patterns?
When I was talking earlier about the categories, I discussed the projected blood that is that a force or a pressure acts upon to eject a volume of blood. This would be categorized in that category and could be a number of different mechanisms.
Sure, but let's just talk about, is this what Exhibit 100 is? Where was the blood? I understand that perhaps because of the flash we're not really able to see it, but if you could tell us where it would be, or show us on the monitor there.
If I can get my finger to do the right working here. There were stains, probably. If I have that about right there would be. It wasn't as concentrated as this, but there, when you can see the photos, you can see similar to this up here.
And this right here, this event underneath it right there, is that the same kind of spatter?
Yes.
Do you know whether or not this spatter here was caused by the same event that caused the spatter?
It would be consistent with being from the same event.
Could it also be a second event?
Potentially.
And Exhibit 103, if you could clear it. this is what we're looking at here, right?
Yes.
Well, what about these heavier ones, heavier drops in there? What is that about?
There could be, this large one could be part of this the passive drops that are down in the bottom of the sink. They can also just be larger blood stains that just drips together.
And if we take a look at exhibit number 101, are we then looking at this spatter? And again, my question is, how come some are dripping and some aren't?
Because when blood is acted upon with force, that not all, the blood droplets don't all break into the same size. And so some are going to be larger. And so some, when they hit that, have more of a weight or a volume, and therefore they drip down from the gravity because they're a larger stain.
What can cause this kind of spatter pattern?
A mechanism that might have done that. I earlier discussed the expirated, which was somebody maybe coughing or sneezing if they have blood in their airways, or from a wound, air forcing that out. The head is a very vascular area, and I don't know if you've ever nicked yourself shaving, then you know that those can bleed quite a bit. And a wound or a laceration to the head could cause the misting and the patterns that we see here, the size staining that we see here.
And what else? Anything else?
Gunshot wounds can produce that type of misting effect as well.
When you are examining these kinds of things, do you just look at it in the pattern without reference to anything else that's at the scene, or do you also look at what may be around these patterns to provide guidance to you as to what, in your opinion, could be causing these patterns?
When we are at the scene, we are making observations of what those patterns are. What do they look like? What are their sizes? And then we use other information, such as investigators' information, the medical examiner's information, to make determinations on what potential mechanisms created those stains.
Do you also look at the area around it
Yes.
potentially to see if there's anything else there? So, for example, in this case, exhibit number 114 shows us what? What are we looking at there?
There is a casing laying in a blood stain.
Well, tell me a little bit about this casing and how it was placed there based on your knowledge of blood spatter, blood spatter training.
The blood stain was there, and the casing came and landed upon that.
If the casing falls into the blood, what does it tell you about the blood source in terms of sequence as to whether or not the blood source was already bleeding before the gunshot wound?
It would tell us the blood was already present, so the blood source was already bleeding prior to the gunshot.
So, I don't know about the sweet person, but what does it tell you in terms of this? Was the blood source already bleeding at the time that this casing somehow found its way into that blood?
Yes.
Approach.
See.
With regard to that casing, in terms of when it was was it placed in relation to the blood? When was that casing placed there in relation to the blood?
After the blood was deposited there.
So the blood source was already bleeding.
Yes.
So based on that, and based on, you indicated that you read the medical examiner's report?
Yes,
correct?
I did.
And having read the medical examiner's report, having taken a look at that, what is your opinion then as to the source in exhibit number 101, or the mechanism as to how that pattern there was formed?
Then I would say that it would be either the expirated, the coughing, or a laceration to the head, one of those mechanisms,
But not the gunshot.
not the gunshot.
take a look at exhibit number 116. Are you familiar with that area?
Yes, this is the linen closet to the north of the sink area.
And exhibit 117, what are we looking at there?
It's an accumulation of blood at the edge of the linen closet.
We keep talking about accumulation of blood. As it applies to this particular accumulation, is that an accumulation that took some time, or is that something that's immediate?
I don't know how much blood is there. It looks like a large amount. It would be a product of time of the blood source being in one position for a little while, but I don't know how long.
And how was it formed? Do you know whether or not it's a product of gravity or perhaps the source laying down?
I do not know.
It could be any of those things,
It
right?
could be those.
The fact that there is blood, for example, in different areas, does that tell you anything about what the blood source may have been doing?
Moving.
Do you have any idea, because of the blood being different places, do you have any idea how fast or how slow the blood source may have been moving, or is that not something you just can't talk about?
Something I just couldn't say.
We then take a look at Exhibit 115 in terms of the item that we just looked at. What are we seeing here?
I'm looking for a better
Well,
light.
then let's take a look at 118. Is this a better one?
It is. There's a box within that linen closet that shows, as you can see these demarcations, that water. I didn't make the blue.
Why don't you clear that up a little bit and start all over? I think you ran your finger.
Finger too much. The markings, there we go, right in that area, show that bloody water has wicked up into the box.
And in this case, how can that be accomplished? How can we get this pattern that's on the box accomplished? How does that happen?
There would be water coming into the water. These other stains, this stain here has the diluted appearance on the edge. It's a lighter shade of red. And you can see the diluted shades of, I don't know if I'm marking everywhere, the diluted shades of blood, and that simply travels up the box in a wicking motion, in a wicking action.
The fact that it looks like it's all the way around the box, does that speak to the volume of blood that was around this area, or is it you can have just a little bit of blood and then it sort of mushrooms out if you apply water to it?
I couldn't quite comment on the volume of blood, other than you can still see the demarcation lines are very red, so it seems like it's not just a drop of blood in water.
Okay. We've seen this item there. Now if we look a little further on down, Exhibit 125, we see another one of those. Do you see that?
Yes.
What can you tell us about the fact that there's these very much larger circular areas of blood? What does that say about the source? Or can you tell us anything about what the source was doing? Well,
the source had, like I addressed earlier, that it could either be the action of the blood source being in one position there for a while, bleeding that accumulation, that little pool, or there could be some process of this with the water contact, it pooling in one area, but I'm not certain about that.
Okay. Exhibit 120. Are you familiar with item number 6 on this photograph?
No.
Are you familiar with having done screening on a hair follicle?
I did screening on a hair. I was not.
Why don't you
not
take
certain that it was number 6.
Do you know whether or not the hair was at the number 6 location or not?
I would only be able to know a property ID number referencing my report, but I don't know.
Why don't you
that
go
off
ahead
the
and
top.
do that, all right? Sure.
Yes.
found what you were looking for, let me know, but don't read it out loud.
I found the property ID number for the one.
All right, go ahead and put the report back and tell me, did you do any work with regard to this number 6?
I know the property ID number.
Oh, I see. You
Can-
need the property ID number?
I know that, can I look into my notes as well?
Sure, please,
Let me
go
see
ahead.
if that helps. If that was number 6LB, that's what I had it referenced as, 6LB,
All right, and what is 6LB?
was a possible hair.
And what did you do with that possible hair back at the lab?
Back at the lab, I did my preliminary Kastle-Meyer test. Didn't get indications of blood, but on the end that appeared to possibly have a root ball, or had white material consistent with being a root. I processed that and sent it forward for DNA analysis.
Why did you focus on the root as opposed to the hair itself?
Because that's where we can get our DNA. That's where,
Is that where
our
the DNA
process-
resides?
Yes, for the way that we process DNA, yes.
Let's take a look at Exhibit 126. And for reference, you see this door trim there? You see that?
Is that the closet?
Well, why don't you take a look at it? And you take a look at it.
If that is the linen closet, that's what I'm just trying to orient myself.
All right. So where would this be then? If this were...
If that is the edge of the linen closet, then this is the west wall of the master bathroom hallway.
My question is, why is this area here much lighter than the other stains that we've been looking at?
Due to the contact with water. That water has spread over this area and has not affected the other areas as much.
See this area right here?
Yes.
What is that?
That would be a transfer stain, as we talked about earlier, a blood-bearing source coming into contact with another source, with another surface.
And so it's sort of a sliding kind of process there?
It is linear, so it could be sliding that way, correct?
Then exhibit number 127. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And what is this? What's going on here?
It appears to be the same. It's a transfer, again, a transfer pattern.
But why is it up here that it's just linear and down here we have it coming down? Do you see that?
There's more volume for one reason, for whatever reason. The contact with the blood source was more. There's more of a volume that caused it to drip down.
Exhibit number 129. See the door up here?
Yes,
And so which wall is this one right here?
that is the west wall.
As we look at this, part of the reason I want to talk about this is, what is this over here first?
That is the saturation stain on the carpet.
So that is carpet then, right?
Yes, that's carpet.
We see this right here. You see that little circle there, kind of half circle thing there? You see that?
I see the carpet.
And then this area here is relatively clean. And then you follow this around and all the way back. It also appears to be relatively clean until you see this spot here and this other spot here that we've talked about previously. How is it, or what does that tell you in terms of the depositing of blood when you have a situation like this, and then you take a look at the left right there?
Or we can see that water has come into contact. It could be that water has gone through the entire middle.
But if water's gone through the middle, what's going on over here? And it seems to be in a round circle down here. Can you tell me how that happens?
Maybe there was something there that prevented it from that area being bloody.
Would it also be consistent with, for example, a cleaning utensil of some sort
It could be, yes.
coming through here and doing this?
Sure.
In looking at these along the wall here, is it a circumstance that the source is bleeding as it goes along there, or are any of those related to strikes, or is it just a situation that the source as it passes through there. However it passes through there, it's just depositing the blood. Is that what's going on?
It could be. They're not really in a pattern for me to determine this was where an impact occurred, this is where something else occurred. They're just a bunch of blood stains and some accumulations and the dilute factor. So I couldn't really talk about a specific incident each down that hall.
But could you tell me whether or not the source at least was in these areas to
Yes.
deposit that blood?
Yes.
And at the same time, was the source at least depositing blood on the left side of it?
Yes.
Now let's take a look at Exhibit 132. Is this the carpet?
Yes, it is.
If that's the carpet, what wall is this one?
That's the east wall.
And again, we see this up here. Do you see right above the switch there? Or not
Yes.
the switch, but the electrical outlet? And then this right here.
Right.
What could create that sort of circular half-moon kind of pattern on the wall?
Any sort of it's a transfer type stain, so anything that would be blood bearing coming into contact with it, or the blood being on the wall and something coming into contact with it and moving it along.
Then if we take a look at the area to the right of the switch in Exhibit 133, we see that circular pattern also, right?
Correct.
And why is it coming down right to the right of that switch? What does that say?
It'd just be a matter of the volume that contacted it right there.
This area here of the blood pattern going through there, does that speak to the height of the action of whether the source had blood or whether there was blood there? Is that what it speaks to, the height?
The height that the transfer occurred at, yes, would be.
And then underneath it is what we have here.
Right.
Would it be consistent with the source being this high and then bleeding down? And these be a result of gravity?
Those could be from gravity. Because of the water, it makes them very difficult to determine them from a specific event, but they were clearly deposited there.
Why does the water make it difficult to do that?
Because it washes away the edges of any of the blood stains and makes them not regularly shaped, which is what we look for in identifying patterns.
Down here, you see this area here?
Yes.
Now, that area was cut out and we've taken a look at it. Have you actually taken a look at the rug yourself? The cutout?
I did see it when somebody else had it out, yes.
And so you did see it.
I did see it.
And with regard to this particular stain, this is exhibit number 131, what can you tell us about it?
That is a large saturation stain, which means that it's a large pool, an accumulation of blood or a blood pool that's gone into an absorbent material, i.e. the carpet.
So can you tell us anything about whether or not the source was standing, kneeling, or whether or not
I couldn't define the position other than it was over that area.
What about right here? Do you see this one sort of seems, for lack of a better term, more pristine, whereas this one up here seems to be rubbed? Do you see that?
Yes.
What could cause that?
It could be any sort of contact with that stain.
Somebody walking through it could do that?
Absolutely.
Were you able to determine whether or not there had been any water applied to this area?
Not when we saw this side, but when we saw the underside, we did.
Okay, I'm asking about what you saw. Okay, so
Okay.
when you saw, did you see the underside?
I did see the underside.
Okay. On the underside, how is it that you were able to see whether or not water had been applied? How are you sure that you did see that?
Because there was, the same way that looking down the hall, there was the dilute blood stains, you could see the light shade of red covering areas of the tile. It was very much diffused around this, under this carpet, under this stain, kind of the same coloration maybe as the box that was in the linen closet. So a lighter shade of red, implying it had been diluted and it had flowed down in that area.
And you were talking about, to take a look at Exhibit 115, you're talking about this box down here at the
Yes.
bottom. So the water that had been applied, were you able to tell if the water had come through the top or if it had just been in this direction? In other words, was the top wet or was it just the bottom? Or speak to me about the moisture on that
Well, when we were at the scene, I don't recall it being wet, but looking at it from underneath, it had at least seeped through from the edge of the tile on, but I don't know how
Okay.
the mechanism for carpet.
Well, let me show you exhibit number 128. We see that same stain there on
Yes.
the left side. Then we look over here on the right. Do you see that on the right?
Yes.
What is going on with that?
It appears to be a lot of transfers, and part of that could be from either stains that have been disrupted by walking over them. It could be a product of the diffused, the diluted blood flowing under, and then it being walked on and coming up to the surface.
So it could
I can't make an absolute determination.
It could be, I think you used the word, did you use trampling?
I said transfer, but are this, like the stepping could be, if there had been nice looking stains there, walking over it could have disrupted that and created this.
Does this imply a lot of walking or a little bit of walking?
Well, it's not a pristine looking area, so it would imply a lot of movement of some sort.
Could it
Or
also be-
contact of some sort.
Could it also be that, do you see that it sort of seems to end here?
Yes.
Did you see any that went this way? This walking motion, or if it was walking this way?
I mean, beyond this?
Yes,
Beyond
beyond
this.
this.
I never saw any blood beyond this area in the
So
bedroom.
this is the only area that you saw this staining of blood, right?
Correct.
Did you see any blood throughout the master bedroom anywhere other than right here in this area?
Just right here, and then I think there was maybe one stain or so right outside the closet here.
Where?
Right over here.
Show me where.
Right here. I just wrote on top of it.
Okay, so was it a large stain or a small?
No, just a couple drops maybe.
A couple drops there? But did you see any near the bed, anywhere
No.
else?
No, I did not.
How about near the area where the bathroom goes into the closet? Did you see any blood staining there at all?
In the closet? No.
On the carpet at all?
No.
So with regard to this staining here, would it be consistent with, and if you know, you don't know, somebody sort of walking on this, for whatever reason they're walking on this particular area and not going into the bedroom,
Yes.
but perhaps going the other way?
Perhaps, yes.
Let's see, look at exhibit number 78. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And was there any staining here? Was there any blood staining at all? That's the closet, right?
That's the closet. No.
And then we have something right here in the corner there. Do you see that?
Yes.
You then go to exhibit number 121. That's the area, right?
Correct.
Well, describe for me what's going on. What's the action?
Another transfer pattern, the contact between a blood-bearing source and another surface in a
And-
linear fashion.
As they're going by.
Yes.
Right. Did that extend in this direction in any way at all?
No.
So that we know where we're headed, exhibit 78. You see the number 2 there?
Yes.
Exhibit number 79 shows us that corner there, right?
Yes.
And right there is what at that turn?
That transfer again.
And exhibit 81 shows us, first of all, what is this part right here?
It appears it could be a transfer
No,
again.
I mean, what does it lead to? This
It
area?
leads to, it's the lip of the shower.
And is that where the body was?
Yes, it was.
And so we then see this right here, this reddish substance. Again, what does that mean in terms of arriving there at that place?
That something, a bloodstained source came into contact with it.
And is it the transfer pattern that you
It's
talked about?
consistent with the transfer, yes.
And is this a swipe or not? I mean, we've used that term also.
I would not be able to make a determination if the blood was there first and got wiped through, or if the thing that made the contact with the shower was the blood
All right?
coated item.
If we then go back to exhibit 121, going to focus in on this area here. Do you see that right there?
I do.
What is that?
It's called a pattern transfer, where you can actually identify a pattern within a transfer stain.
And the pattern that you have there, is that consistent with a barefoot? Is that consistent with socks, or is that consistent with shoes?
It's consistent with a shoe tread.
So it's not consistent with a barefoot,
Correct.
and it's not consistent with a sock.
Correct.
So if we look at Exhibit 122, that's what we're looking at, right?
Yes.
And what's the direction of this particular stain? If
It
we
is-
then, let me give you Exhibit 249. And I'll bring it in closer. It was right in this area, correct?
I think I just saw, can you lower it down a little bit? I think I saw where it says shoe tread right on the lip there, shoe impression. Somebody
Okay.
says they're drawing.
What was the direction of that print?
This is, it was,
All right. And that's the direction of this footprint that we have here. If you could
Yes.
clear it out for me.
yes, sorry.
Exhibit 162. See this right here?
Yes, I do.
Is that a shoe or is that a sock?
Appears to be a sock.
Would this sock make in Exhibit 122 this pattern?
No, it would not.
Go back to this photograph, Exhibit number 162. See that down there? What is that?
A foot.
Is
A
that
barefoot.
foot? Does that foot have a sock on there?
Doesn't appear to.
Does it have a shoe on there?
No, it does not.
Could that foot have made that pattern that we see there?
No, it could not.
What does it mean when this pattern is in what? Blood, right?
Correct.
What does it mean in terms of the individual who wore this shoe, in terms of the sequencing and how this blood could have arrived there?
That they were walking through the bathroom after blood was shed.
And after they were wearing shoes?
And after they were, yes, correct.
I don't have any other questions.
Cross-examination.
Ms. Berry, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to begin, before we get into some of the other things you talked about being at the crime scene, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And a few moments ago, I think recently enough, I won't show you the picture again, the state showed you a bit of blood that was on the lip of the shower.
Correct.
Or the base of the shower, right?
Yes.
Okay. In the shower stall, the walls, everything that encased it, was there any blood found there?
On the floor only.
Okay, on the floor only, not on the walls?
No.
Okay. And no traces of blood on any of the walls, correct?
No.
Testing, okay. Now, I just want to go back to Exhibit 249. I believe this will demonstrate things a little better than the photos. A few moments ago, Mr. Martinez showed you the pool of blood that is denoted that was in the carpet that's denoted by this area. Do you recall seeing that?
I did.
Okay. And he asked you some questions about if there was any blood any farther inside the room than that point where the blood ended in the pool.
Correct.
Okay. And you mentioned a few drops that were over towards the closet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But you said there was no blood in the closet.
No blood in the closet.
And it seemed to me what the implication here was in terms of what you were saying is that someone could not have walked through the blood-covered carpet into the closet without bringing some trace of blood with them. Is that accurate?
It seems like a logical explanation,
Okay.
yes.
So, and ultimately what we're really saying, whether it's into the closet or not, no one would have walked through that pool of blood once it was deposited. Is that accurate?
Nobody would have walked through,
Walked through it because we would have seen signs of transfer, at least towards the room, I should say.
but towards the bedroom, I didn't see anything beyond that one little area. Whether somebody would walk through, I don't know.
Right. And if I was unclear,
Okay,
I
sorry.
apologize. But no, you wouldn't see, there's no evidence of somebody having walked through after that blood was deposited there.
Correct.
Is that correct? That's all I have. Thank you.
Any redirect?
With regard to somebody either walking through that area into the bedroom, where have we looked at that has all of the blood in it?
It's all the blood is in the blood is in the master bathroom and that area of the carpet.
And in the master bathroom, is there something called water?
Yes,
Was water used in this case as part of an attempt by whoever it was to sort of change the patterns there?
Objections, to be honest, so cross.
Overruled.
can you, no, after that pause, can you restate the question? Sorry.
Could you read it back to her?
Was water used in this case as part of an attempt by whoever it was to sort of change the matter?
I would say water did change the matter. As to the motivation, I wouldn't want to speculate on that, but water did alter what I saw.
And that water that was used in there, could that water also be used, for example, to wash, I don't know, hands? Could they also be done to do that?
Yes,
Could it also be done to, for example, clean feet? Could it be done to do that?
yes,
And water, do you know what a towel is?
yes.
Could a towel then, after water was used, could that be used to wipe up feet and hands and that sort of thing?
Way beyond the scope of cross.
Sustained.
You were asked whether or not you saw anything or any other blood, if you will, Exhibit 249, in this area here, right?
Correct.
With regard to the properties of blood, is it difficult for water to clean them off the body, for example, the hands?
To wash blood off the hands?
Right.
No.
I don't have any other questions.
Looks like we have a few questions from the jury. Are there any other questions? Counsel, please approach. right, the jurors have some questions for you. Is it possible for the shower to have been completely cleaned of blood on the walls and door with water?
It would wash away the appearance of it, so you wouldn't necessarily be able to see anything if you washed it, put enough water on it.
Would there have been some trace even if washed?
If we had done testing, we might have been able to prove that, yes.
Is there a way to measure the volume of blood in the rooms? And if so, where most of the blood was located?
As far as measuring a quantity of blood, it's really, I would say, more of a medical professional's opinion to be able to offer that. I could just say that it was an accumulation and there seemed to be quite a substantial amount of it, but I couldn't offer an opinion of how many milliliters it was.
Any other questions from the jury? Follow-up from the state?
No, thank you.
Mr. Nurmi?
Did I hear you correctly? You didn't test anything else in the shower?
In the shower, I did not do any testing in the shower.
And by we, you mean Mesa Police Department?
Well, that I personally didn't conduct any testing. I don't know about other units.
Okay, thank you.
You may step down. The state may call its next witness.
Calls Detective Flores.
Detective Flores, do you understand?
Yes, I do.
Your name, sir?
Detective Esteban Flores.
And yesterday we were talking about the statement that you had with or the telephonic conversation that you had with the defendant on June 25th of 2008, correct?
Yes.
And during that time, did you and she discuss her knowledge of the PIN numbers used by Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
And does Exhibit 295, clip number 23, include that portion of the conversation?
Yes.
Move for the admission of Exhibit 295.
May we approach?
You may. $295 is admitted.
Never give you his voicemail from his phone?
No.
Did you ever obtain it at any time? Or?
I didn't have it, but he had one PIN number that he always used, and that was 1220. I don't know if that was his voicemail PIN number too. Oh, and he had a garage PIN that I have too, which is different. His 1220 was his PIN for his ATM, because there were many times when he gave his card to go get money.
Do you think he had his phone as well?
It's possible. I don't know what kind of. I mean, mine's not password protected. Oh, mine is password protected. Mine before it wasn't. So so the one for his ATM was Joseph Smith's birthday, so that's how I always remember that. And then he gave me the garage PIN number, which was 0187, and I think that was Chris Hughes' birthday.
Oh.
Sir, as part of this investigation, were the police able to learn whether or not there were any roommates that Mr. Alexander had?
Yes, he had 2 roommates at the time.
And with regard to those 2 roommates, what are their names?
I cannot remember their names off the top of my head right now.
Do you know Zachary Billings? Do you know
Yes, Zachary Billings.
And Enrique was the other one? Right?
Yes.
With regard to those 2 individuals, did the police investigate their whereabouts at the time that this crime occurred?
Yes, we did.
And were you able to establish where they were at the time that this crime occurred?
Yes.
And were they associated in any way with this crime pursuant to your investigation?
They were not.
Sir, did you have occasion to view the Inside Edition interview that the defendant gave in September of 2008? Were you able to view that?
Yes, I was.
With regard to that, were you able to listen as she discussed the issue of whether or not she had killed Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
and also whether or not any jury would convict her?
Yes.
Are those two excerpts, exhibits number 247 and 248?
Yes, they were.
I move for the admission of exhibits 247 and 248.
A reapproach?
You may. Exhibits 247 and 248 are admitted.
Go listen to exhibit number 247. This is exhibit 247.
I understand that everything, all of the evidence against me right now is very compelling.
What really happened in there?
In a nutshell, 2 people took Travis's life, 2 monsters.
You did not shoot Travis.
No, I've never even shot a real gun.
You did not stab him 27
I've
times.
Never, no, that's heinous.
Or
I've never.
slit his throat from ear to ear.
I can't imagine slitting anyone's throat.
Sure, let's take a look at exhibit number 248.
No jury is going to convict me
Why not?
because I'm innocent, and you can mark my words on that one. No jury will convict me.
I don't have any other questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Reapproach, Judge.
You may. may proceed.
Hello again, Detective.
Hello.
A few days back, I guess it was yesterday, we heard some excerpts of a call you had with Miss Arias, I believe, on the 25th of June. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And I think we heard you say that that entire conversation was about an hour and 45 minutes, the one we heard excerpts from?
Yeah, it was over an hour.
Okay. And during that phone conversation, you talked to her about how prior to her move, remember there was discussion about her move in April of 2008,
Yes.
correct? Okay. And during that discussion, you talked about how she talked about how she lived with Mr. Alexander for 4 or 5 days. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. Was that anything you discussed with Mr. Alexander's roommates? Do you have any knowledge if they knew about that or not?
No, I did not ask them about that.
Okay. And during that same line of questioning, I guess, when she talked about moving back home to Wairika, there was some discussion about phone calls or phone contacts she had with Mr. Alexander subsequent to moving back to Wairika. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And do the phone records bear that out? The phone records you obtained bear that out, that the two were conversing after she returned in April?
I would have to look at the phone records to be absolutely positive.
Okay.
I know they had constant contact back and forth with each other.
Okay. And there wasn't a point in time where that ceased for a long period of time, it would seem, right?
No.
Okay. So I guess we could assume then that that probably took place in April, May of 2008, right? That phone contact.
Could have.
Okay. Now, there was also another case mentioned around the same time period. Miss Arias mentioned that she trashed his car.
Yes.
Do you recall that? And I just wanted to put it in context because of the excerpts. We were talking about an incident where a U-Haul dolly was involved and the engine exploded. That's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yes, it was an accident.
Okay. Just a minute, Your Honor. I want to talk to you about, well, let's back way up a bit here, because I think you probably told us this the first time you took the stand, but could you remind us again how long you've worked for the Mason Police Department?
19 years.
Okay. And how long you've been a detective?
For about, since 2002.
Okay. So I'm guessing way back when, 19 years ago, when you started as a patrol officer, I would assume?
Yes.
Okay. That you went through the academy, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And while you were at the academy, you probably learned the importance of report writing,
Yes.
correct? And when I say report, we're talking about departmental reports. Sometimes we call them DRs.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. And one of the things you probably learned is it's important to be honest and accurate as possible in those police reports because they could be used later on in proceedings such as these, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I suspect, and detective's a promotion, correct?
Not really in my department. It's more just like a lateral move.
Okay.
It's a specialty. is what we
Okay, it's
consider
a
it.
special unit. But over the course of your career, I suspect you attempted to endeavor in becoming a detective. You expected to endeavor to make the most accurate and honest police report you could. Is that fair to
Yes.
say? Okay.
Yes.
Have you reviewed your police report recently, Detective?
Within the last few weeks, yes. I
Okay.
have.
Well, let me maybe get a copy of it for you. Your Honor, if I may approach.
Yes.
Detective, it appears your report has been marked as Exhibit 290. You could do me a favor, and I opened it to page 17 for you. Read all the way the portion of begins with autopsy and ending at the portion just to yourself that begins with initial interview with Chris and Scott Hughes. Could you review that for me, please?
Sure. You said beginning with autopsy?
Yes, I believe that's at the very bottom of page 17. And your discussion of the autopsy goes to the middle of page 18.
Okay.
All right. And based on what we read there, it appears that you attended the autopsy of Mr. Alexander on 6/12 of 2008. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And just so we're clear as well, I see on your report
State your question.
it appears you authored your report on August 27th, of 2008. Is that correct?
Do you still have an objection? No, for that. All right, you may answer.
Yes, August 27th.
Okay. And just so we're clear, is that the day you wrote it, or do you is that the date it's finalized? How does that work?
That's the day it was, this section of the report, or this portion of it, was entered into our report management system.
Okay. So prior to writing a report, you take notes, something of that nature?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And then you get together at a certain point in time and put it together?
Yes.
And the final draft, so to speak, is what we're talking about of 8/27/2008.
Yes, and it gives it that timestamp of
Okay.
when it was finally entered.
All right. And in that report, you communicate, or it seems like you learned the fact that
Objection here states to pull from the report improper impeachment.
Restate your question.
right, and finished it, but it appears that you came away from that autopsy with the knowledge, or with the belief, that Mr. Alexander had been shot first. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you base that on your conversation with Dr. Horn, excuse me.
With my observations through the observation window, and also with a small conversation with the doctor.
Okay. And then do you recall on August 7th of 2009 giving some testimony in court related to this case?
Yes, it's almost a year later.
Yes. In a moment, Your Honor. And Your Honor, if I may approach the witness.
You may.
Detective, this has been marked as Exhibit 260. I'm going to place it before you for now. I know you probably don't remember what you said exactly, As you pointed out, it was almost a year later to the police report that you wrote. But you were under oath when you gave this testimony, right?
Yes.
Okay. If you could be so kind, let's see here, as to turn to page 18 of that document. And I'll draw your attention to line 14.
Yes.
And you were asked there if you had spoken to Dr. Horn about this case.
Hearsay.
It's sworn testimony, Judge.
Approach, please. Continue.
You were asked if you, on that day, you were asked if you had spoken to Dr. Horn about this case. Is that correct?
Objection, improper impeachment.
Overruled. You may answer that question. Yes.
Yes.
And you recall the answer you gave?
I stated I did.
Okay. And when did that conversation take place?
A day prior to this hearing.
Okay. So your conversation with Dr. Horn then would have took place on August 6, 2009.
Yes.
Okay. And you were in court for his testimony, correct?
I don't recall if I was or not.
Okay. Did you hear him testify to the idea that he didn't talk to you on August 6, 2009?
Objection to states Dr. Horn's statement. He said he doesn't remember.
All right, so your testimony was that you spoke to Dr. Horn one day before you gave this testimony.
Are you talking about this testimony here?
Yes. Not testimony today, but testimony here. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. And in that testimony, you were asked about the sequencing of injuries according to Dr. Horn. Is that correct?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And you were asked about, in terms of sequencing, which came first? Which wound came first, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you recall what your answer was?
I answered that the gunshot was possibly first.
Okay. And what did you base your answer on?
Well, I'd spoken to Dr. Horn the day before over the phone on a short conversation, knowing that I was having a hearing on this matter, and discussed mainly what kind of pain the victim would have gone through at that time, if the victim had suffered at that time, those kinds of questions.
Okay.
And during that, we kind of discussed some other things, and one of them was very briefly the sequencing.
Okay. Well, you say very briefly, but this would be important if you're giving sworn testimony in court, right?
The sequencing was not that important in this case at that time.
So you felt it wasn't important to give accurate testimony in court in your prior proceedings? Is that what you're telling me?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the most important portion was the whether the victim, Travis Alexander, suffered in this
Well,
case.
let me ask you
or
not what's the most important portion. Let's focus on what I asked. What I asked was whether or not it was important to give accurate testimony when you're testifying in a court.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And you did testify to the idea that the gunshot wound to the head was first, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you went on, you were asked also in that hearing, and you also talked about unconsciousness and that sort of thing. But you also talked about whether or not after incurring the shot to the head, Mr. Alexander could be conscious. Do you recall being asked that?
Yes.
Okay. And you relayed, do you recall relaying the opinion that Mr. Alexander would be conscious after being suffering the shot to the head?
Yes, but that was my opinion at that time.
That was your opinion, but what you were, so you weren't relaying Dr. Horn's opinion as you said during those transcripts? You were relaying your own?
I would say that was my understanding of what the situation was, but I'm not the doctor. I'm not the ultimate decision maker on that.
So your claim here today is that when you were at this important proceeding in this death penalty case, you were giving your opinion as to what you thought Dr. Horn might think, as opposed to when you were testifying, you told the parties involved there that you'd spoken to him and this is what he believed.
That was my understanding.
You also gave opinions about that supported this theory that Mr. Alexander had been shot first, correct?
Yes, I do recall that.
Okay. I mean, specifically, you talked about that he aspirated blood over the sink, correct?
Yes, I do remember that.
And what does that mean?
Aspirated blood means blood being aspirated through the mouth and through the nose and onto an object such as the sink or the mirror in this case.
Okay. So now you said, it was your misunderstanding of Dr. Horn's testimony and that sort of thing. And you said you weren't sure if you were here in court, but in these court proceedings, is this the first you've heard of a different story being told about when the wounds occurred?
No.
You've heard about it before?
Yes, during Dr. Horn's testimony.
Okay.
I thought you were talking about another testimony Dr. Horn gave, but I was here during his testimony the other day.
Okay. So during this trial, Dr. Horn's testimony, you were here, right?
Yes, I was.
Okay. I want to be accurate this time. And you heard him testify then that he hadn't spoken with you the day before the hearing, correct?
Objection to State's testimony. He said he didn't know.
Sustained.
You heard him also testify that says some of the things that we just talked about not losing consciousness, how that was something that he would never have said. You heard him say that?
Yes.
Okay. But that's what you testified to at the hearing.
Yes.
Okay. And so this change of story is something that you first heard about at trial.
No, it's not the first time I've heard of it.
Okay. When was the first time you heard this story changed?
I don't remember. It might be several months ago or a year ago.
What was the context?
I don't recall exactly, but I know Dr. Horn had gone and given an interview, I guess, with you and defense counsel, and something came out to me informing me of what he stated during the interview.
Okay. Did you make any attempts to correct the mistaken testimony you gave in 2009?
No, because I told the truth and spoke to what I believed at that time. I'm not about to change my testimony.
But it was inaccurate.
It was not inaccurate, it was mistaken.
Mistaken,
And
I see.
that's my mistake if I mistook his words or misunderstood him, but I am not a doctor, and I'm not about to give testimony on experience of a doctor.
I'm not saying you're a doctor, detective. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying, and we just talked about it, about the importance of giving accurate testimony. And in this hearing, you were asked specifically, if you talked to Dr. Horn, you said yes. You were asked if Dr. Horn had an opinion of the sequencing of the injuries, right?
Yes.
They didn't ask you, what do you think, Detective Flores? What's your medical opinion? They didn't ask you that, did they?
No.
They asked you, what was Dr. Horn's opinion? And that's a pretty simple question, straightforward, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so what you're telling us today is that you substituted your judgment for his? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
No, if I gave that testimony, it was a misunderstanding of what Dr. Horn told me.
Okay. So, it's inaccurate, is what you're saying today.
Yes.
Okay. And that's what I asked you a few moments ago. Did you take any steps to correct your inaccurate testimony? And you said, no, it wasn't inaccurate. It was a misunderstanding.
Yes.
I'm confused. Well, is it inaccurate or is it a misunderstanding? Which is it?
Well, it's a misunderstanding of what Dr. Horn told me.
Okay, it's a pretty big one, isn't it?
No, I don't believe so.
You don't believe so? Okay. Judge, if we could take a break at this point in time.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take the afternoon recess at this time. Please be back in the designated area at 10 minutes after 3. Please remember the admonition. You are excused. Counsel, could you approach for just a moment?